Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past shows are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at artistfirst.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man, and I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And we are damn glad to be back.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Mm-hmm.
Did you all miss us? I cannot say truthfully that we missed. It was nice to have a couple of weeks off.
Right.
But now we're back. It's 2025, and we're raring to go.
Mm-hmm.
And tonight we are going to talk about the futility of all existence. And why matter doesn't matter.
Right. Why does matter not matter?
Why does matter not matter? Well, in fact, we are going to talk about why matter doesn't matter, and really how little matter there is. But before we get deeply into that,
right?
Yes.
Do you want me to read it?
Well, that would be deeply getting into it. I thought you wanted me to stop for a minute there. But before we get deeply into that, we did wish everyone a happy New Year, and we are going to make some changes this year. We're going to quit.
What?
No, we're not. I want to announce in the air right now that this is the last show. No, it's not.
What are you doing?
I have no idea. I'm very tired.
I see that, too.
I'm very tired. But I'm going to try and pull it all together because for the sake of matter alone, we're going to make this show matter. And to reel it all back in a little bit, we came across, I think, an interesting factoid, if you will, about matter, about the universe. And I think because of the sort of the prejudice of existence that we have here on a little planet, we kind of think that, like many people do about America or about the world, they think, well, everything is like the East Coast or everything's like L.A. or New York City. It's all full of buildings and people and everybody is crowded together and elbows, knocking against each other and all that stuff. But if you look at the rest of the country or the rest of the world, if you were, for argument's sake, taking a sort of an average, throw a dart at the Earth and see where it lands and see if it would hit anybody, like a meteor coming in, 99 point, however many nines you want, it's going to hit nothing but emptiness. It's going to hit, the middle of the ocean or something. Well, even, when we think of ourselves then, therefore, as sort of a planet and we're orbiting a sun, we say, well, there's lots of stuff around. There's all these planets nearby and everything seems warm and cozy. And then you get a little bit further and say, well, there's asteroids and there's, Oort cloud objects and you say, well, there's a lot of stuff in the universe, right? It seems in every, every science fiction or every Marvel Universe movie that the minute you take off from Earth, you hit right into some other planet. It's interesting immediately.
Yeah. Or some other species.
Or some other species instantly, like, bam, there they are, But in fact, that's a real, a desperate fiction because from the point of view of matter itself, the universe is really basically empty and with small amounts of impurities. And I mean vanishingly small amounts of impurities.
Yes, statistically speaking. Ridiculous.
Ridiculous. We're going to go into some of the numbers, and some of the numbers are hard to kind of wrap your head around. But just in general, if you think about the universe as a whole, or just let's talk about just our little backyard galaxy. It's a big thing, The quote that we're going to read, if we do ever read it, it talks about the volume of the Milky Way. The Milky Way is where our little planet and our little sun happens to reside, and it seems, it's got a lot of lights in it. You look up in the night sky, see a lot of stars.
The Milky Way is our galaxy,
our home galaxy,
and the sun and its planets. This is our solar system. And we continually believe that there's got to be a heck of a lot more out there.
Yeah.
But
stuff.
Yeah, and frankly, when we look up into the sky, we see all those billions of lights, and you're thinking it's gotta be.
Yeah. But that is a desperate illusion.
Well, it's fascinating when you think about it, because you're looking at the vastness. You get a feel for the vastness of the universe, the galaxy, let's say, because I don't know, we can't see to the other end of the universe, let's face it. We barely can see the wholeness of our own galaxy. But the amount of space that's in between every little dot that you see, every little point of light, it takes a reversal of thinking to take into account the space that is around every single dot. We're trained for our eyes to look and focus in on the differences, the anomalies, let's say, of what you're looking at. So when you're looking at the night sky, you see the points of light. You're not really taking in the fact that there is space in between every single point of light. Or how much space is actually in between every point of light.
Right.
You just oh, it's pretty.
I mean, the interesting, just another little factoid. Many of the lights that you see out in the night sky are not stars. Many of them are actually whole galaxies of their own. But not to get too deeply into it. So if we just stick with our little neck of the woods, our little Milky Way. So what we found is this beautiful sort of quote, and it goes like this: the scale of the emptiness of the universe is staggering. So our Milky Way has, if you think of the Milky Way as fitting inside a jar, it's a very big jar. The jar is...
Yeah, if you take for a moment, you're trying to squish it all into a jar. You're taking...
Well, let me...
I will...
Let me go through it. So the jar that it's in right now, the jar that it exists in, if you will, the space of that jar, is 8 trillion light years, cubic light years. Now, what does that mean? It's about 1/3 of the U.S. debt. If you think of it that way. So our debt is about $30 trillion, and this is 8 trillion cubic light years. So it's slightly smaller than the U.S. debt, but yet it's very, very large, a very, very large volume, and a light year is a huge thing. It's ridiculous amount of space. So 8 trillion of those. So that's a lot. It sounds like a lot. It sounds like more than one or two. It sounds like a lot of things, right? That's what the Milky Way's stars kind of sit in, this gigantic jar. And there's about 100 billion of them. So you have 8 trillion. You think, well, 8 trillion, 100 billion. That doesn't sound too big. Like that. That's a good neighborhood. 8 trillion. It's like we have suburban houses. They're separated by nice green yards, and you have those stars. That sounds great. But if you wanted to squish all those stars, Margaret was just saying, let's say you wanted to squish them all into the smallest volume that you could possibly fit them in. You'd say, well, how small could it possibly be? How much of all the matter that exists in the universe, what size jar could it actually fit in? Well, it's still a big jar. But you could fit it all, not in 8 trillion light years, but in 1 cubic light year. And 1 cubic light year is far less than 8 trillion. It's like taking the whole U.S. debt and saying, I'll give you $1 for it, and it'll all fit inside the dollar. I say, well, that's a great dollar, that dollar. But in fact, the whole Milky Way, all the matter in the Milky Way, everything that you've ever seen in the Milky Way and things you've never seen, all fits not into 1 cubic light year, or rather you could fit the Milky Way in there, along with 3 billion, with a B, other Milky Ways. So 3 billion of your closest neighbor Milky Ways and you could all fit in that cubic light year.
Yes.
And you say to yourself, well, that seems crazy town. It means that most of what you see in the Milky Way is just empty space. There's the amount of matter, all the matter you see is such a small amount of the universe itself, of the thing that we call the universe, that the Milky Way, which is a gigantic thing, doesn't make a speck in it, doesn't make a drop in it.
Right.
And so you start to think that all of this stuff that we think is so important, everything that's all around us, is infinitesimally smaller than just even one Milky Way. So that amount of matter, the things that we think matter, are incredibly, infinitesimally small. And then it gets worse. It gets much worse. Because as recent theories have proven, that all of the matter you see, the whole thing, the whole enchilada, the whole universe, everything that you can see, is about 5% of what the actual universe is made up of. 95% is something else that we really don't understand at all. Dark matter, dark energy, bubblegum, who knows what. So everything you can see, which you can squish into a tiny little itty-bitty corner of the universe, is only 5% of what there actually is, what the actual universe is. So it's all this stuff we have no idea, all this other energy we have no idea, then the space itself, which is just empty, and then really down near the bottom, near where you would say, well, geez, it doesn't really matter anymore, there's matter. And then of that matter, a very small percentage of it is you and me. Very, very small. And yet, we know all of this. We are beings within it. The consciousness that we are can comprehend this, can say, look at the universe, look at what it is, sense it in some way, shape, or form, be within it. And the reality of the matter becomes, its reality becomes almost immaterial if you think of it in that sense. You can consider all the matter. You can think about the whole thing. It all can exist within your consciousness. Isn't that amazing?
The question rises. You know, when you realize the vastness of space, and the fact that matter is a very, very, very small percentage of that space.
Almost an afterthought.
The question that rises in your mind is, what really exists? I mean, because we're born on this world, and we have a tendency to focus on what matter is, or what matters to us. It's interesting that the word itself is used in both ways. But when you're born into this body, you realize that certain things are hard. Your experience as a child, you're trying to figure out how to make this body function. How do you make your hand work? How does my hand pick up that piece of matter, that toy over there? And all you know is your interaction with it. Your eyes are perceiving a color. You might even perceive a certain type of smell. And if you are actually able to grab onto the matter, it has a texture and a temperature and a
weight,
consistency to it.
Yep.
All the things that we use to describe matter. But how does that actually fit into this vastness that is the universe, that is the space and time that we happen to be existing in? Does it only exist because we're interacting with it? Because in essence, when you're calculating a percentage of error margin, whenever you're doing anything, matter falls into the error margin that you can basically assume it doesn't exist. This place doesn't exist, but the fact that we're interacting with it makes it real.
Let me compare again. Let's go back to the U.S. deficit or the debt. Your allowance or your salary is a rounding, not a rounding error. It's insignificant compared to the $30 trillion odd dollars. Well, all of matter is insignificant compared to the volume, to the presence of the thing which is the universe. And yet it can be comprehended. It can be observed. In fact, it just not only can it be observed, it must be observed. The story gets worse because now that we understand something about the uncertainty principles and how causality is not really causal, and how the state of the matter, which hardly matters, is dependent on whether or not you're observing it, whether or not you've collapsed its uncertainty into something let's call for a moment reality. The universe gets worse. It gets worse because all that matter in the thing which is the universe, which Margaret just very aptly said could be considered nearly a rounding error, nearly non-existent.
There's a lot of assumptions that you can make. That it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. But the observed thing, the universe, obviously does. Matter within the universe, in other words, the stuff, the clockworks, the things that move around in the universe or shine or explode or collapse or whatever those things are, Margaret said it earlier, we make them important because our physical existence is trained to notice anomalies, to notice objects. But if we were just considering them from the point of view of consciousness or the point of view of universe, they don't really exist. They are not only, they're very much akin, Margaret, in some ways to form. The concept of form, which Tolle goes into in great depth in his teachings. Matter is the incidental, ephemeral, almost ignorable part of the universe, which is constantly just going away. It's sort of coming into existence. It has a form for a very brief period, a very brief interval. It's not even a good idea to say time, but a very brief interval, and then it changes. In fact, if you looked at it carefully, it not only changes with every moment of existence, but yet it also comes into or becomes real as it's observed in a moment of existence. In a very true sense, the universe is not the matter that is within it at all. Not at all. If you looked at the universe as a thing, matter is not what it is. Matter is the dust motes in the room. Just happen to settle on one particular part of the room for a moment, and then they're blown around by the next thing. If you're looking at the room, you don't even see the dust motes. They aren't material. So the question that we're going to bring into this discussion is, so what is? Mm-hmm. Or even why is?
Now that's a good analogy. If you have a large room, empty space, and enough light to see the movement of the dust motes moving around, that pretty much comes as close as we can think of as an analogy for what the universe actually is. And frankly, it's very little dust motes, mind you.
Very, very little.
Very little. But the fact that you could just barely perceive these things, only if the light is shining and you see them moving around, sort of reminds you of the way we handle quantum theory.
Yeah.
Watching the behavior of light, and usually there it is. It's just, this is the way we humans are operating. But what I find fascinating is that we take those dust motes as more real in our existence than the vastness of what's actually containing it.
Mm.
You know, we're here to interact with all the dust motes, which I find absolutely, it's like, what is reality then? If all we're doing is playing with dust motes, what is our concept of ourselves? Is that all we are? See, that's the interesting thing. You're focusing on all these tiny little dust motes and the importance of categorizing every dust mote in shape and form and color. But who are you really? That you actually are in that room interacting with the dust motes.
Well, exactly. To carry your analogy a little further, if you identify with the dust motes,
Mm-hmm.
so you say, I am a piece of matter in this vast universe, what you've basically identified with is nearly non-existent.
Right. This tiniest piece of fluff.
It has no life. It has no presence. It is merely a piece of creation, which if you looked at it from the point of view of statistically, it's not even a dust mote. It is literally non-existent.
Right.
In the room, if you identify with matter, you identify with something. You see, you have to. As you said it earlier, you have to turn this whole thing on its head and say that the matter that you identify with is like identifying with a ghost. It's like identifying with something which really doesn't exist, an illusion. Another thing that we just bring in here for a moment, some of the way that current theory looks at the universe is that it has no, if you look at the universe from the outside, which is as a thought experiment, this is like an Einstein thought experiment. You look at the universe from the outside, it has no dimension. Dimensions don't exist outside of a universe. It has no time, it has no space. It's just a singularity in essence. When you look at the universe from the outside, it has no dimension. It has no volume. It just is a point. It's really a dimensionless point. However, if you look at it from a slightly closer point of view, you can say that it's not dimensionless. It may have at least a surface which you could think of as being a sphere. Whatever is inside that universe is a projection of this two-dimensional surface into a three-dimensional, call it a space. So when you go into the universe, it appears to have dimensions. It appears to have the dimensions of space and the dimension of time, and therefore causality. But all of what you see, the whole universe as a whole, if you looked at it from the outside, doesn't have any of those things.
Right.
Within it are projections, and within the projections, the space and the time, there are insignificant afterthoughts which are matter. So if you identify yourself with the matter, you're ignoring not just nearly all of creation, you're literally focusing upon that which does not exist in truth from the point of view of the universe, the being, the thing, the actual existence has no matter within it. That's not true, but from the point of view of the existence, matter is not a significant thing. It's actually, it's worse than the dust mote because it just kind of happens for a while and then stops happening, and no one cares. The universe cares nothing for matter. Matter doesn't even cast a shadow in the universe, if you think of it that way.
Well, you can barely see it. If you think of the dust motes, can you see the shadow of a dust mote?
Right. So if you turn that around and then you bring it down to the personal, within the universe, we are consciousnesses within, and in this case, encompassed within matter, incarnate within matter. But we've been given, in essence, an incarnation within almost an insignificant thing within the consciousness. Here's a dust mote for you to hang on to as a perch from which you can be an independent observer of the all. And the all doesn't care about matter. Every one of our philosophies, every one of our religions, every one of our enlightened paths sees a portion of this truth and realizes that we are not this dull matter, to quote the movie. We are not what we are incarnate within. And we have many different concepts of what that means. But the basic one is we are not matter. When you see a life incarnate in flesh, you don't say, well, the flesh is the life, because the flesh changes. The flesh, like all matter, it gathers, it decays, it comes into being, it goes away. It's form. It's not eternal. But the eternal portion of you, that which can comprehend the universe, which can exist within as a being, is incorrect in identifying itself with matter. So the illusion to focus your awareness and try to stuff it within the illusion is to make you try to fit into the insignificant portion of the universe which really doesn't exist. And it's hard. It feels hard. It feels wrong. It is hard and it is wrong. And all the paths of enlightenment, all the paths that bring you towards being, take you away from matter, because matter doesn't matter. Matter doesn't really matter. Matter is a perch. Matter is a point. Matter is a place from which you can observe. But it isn't who you are. It isn't who I am. It isn't who you are. And we are given all the clues. Every time we look, matter gets less and less important. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It gets less and less real. If you say reality is a physical reality, matter is the least thing. It barely exists unless you're looking at it. It changes all the time. It has no permanence whatsoever. It's continually in motion and continually changing. It's to say I'm standing on this rock is to say it's even worse than I'm standing on air. You're literally identifying which is not real. And to the extent that you identify with it, you fixate upon it. It sort of feels real, but it only feels real because of your fixation. It's hard to turn it around because all the illusion tells you it's real, but it's not real. And the deeper you get, the less really less it gets. That was a terrible word. That wasn't a real word. The less real it gets.
Well, I like to think of it in terms of matter is actually a plaything. It's a toy by which we begin to learn how to live down here.
Like a sandbox.
Well, just that when you realize that it's a substance that we've been given that's basically occupying our consciousness. We look at it like we could play with it, we can manipulate things. And then we believe that thought is or concepts are different from matter. But at that point, it's just a pattern. I mean, honestly, a lot of the matter is a pattern of light energy that is at a low frequency that we can actually lay our hands on. And concepts are just, it's a little bit, this different frequency that our minds, our mental faculties can actually lay our mental fingers on. When you begin to realize that your interactions are on all these different levels or frequencies that you can interact on, it's a fascinating way of looking at your being state. You can think, you can feel, you have emotions. Emotions are interesting because what's triggering this emotion? Is it a thing? Is it a concept? What has sparked this? And that interaction where your consciousness is taking this in and interacting with it, playing with it, exploring it, that's what is the important part of this, which is the reason why I believe that we focus on matter. It's like when you're going to school, you're going there to learn. And usually the way you learn is in class with books, so you have to sit there and you have to wrestle with whatever concepts or situations that they put you in order to learn. And that becomes more real. When you're in that kind of state, then school matters. It all matters because you're trying to learn. Now, what happens when you realize that you've learned a lot of basic interactions, whether it's physical or mental constructs on how things or theories may be, or relationship concepts where you're interacting in emotional ways, and understanding what your choice happens to be in that particular moment, how all that fits in. How does that all fit in? What your experiences are and how you respond, that turns out to be the thing that you will take with you in your consciousness. And your consciousness is the substance of the space itself. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
It's what actually matters.
So it will perpetuate through all, of eternity. The time-space is not non-existent in that sense. But that is the what is important.
Well, I think that's what's real.
Well, this is the thing. We concentrate on the matter because that's kind of what we're programmed to do down here. That's the whole purpose of it. This is why you're going to school. But when you get to a certain point, you realize, well, I've got to expand it. I've got to expand it because I know I'm more than just what I'm thinking, and I'm more than just what someone's opinion of me is, and I'm more than just what has happened to me. And that's when you begin to explore things that are not of matter, meaning substance, but of the energy of relationship, the energy of understanding how you're interacting with the world around you and with the beings around you.
I mean, there's so many clues. I mean, what you just went through is perfect example. The beginning is matter-based, if you will. If you're coming into incarnation, you look at matter as being you. But the more you even learn in the sciences, the more you realize that, matter suddenly is also energy. Well, we know that's true, but how does that make any sense? You mentioned it just a moment ago. Matter is really just a cold form of energy. It's energy which is now bound up in something we call matter. But just for a moment, in the universal sense, every piece of matter has a form, but we know for a fact, again, if you go into this is all science, that if it goes very fast, it changes. It changes its length, its speed, its mass. Every physical property of it changes. Well, eternal things don't do that. Eternal things aren't affected by the speed they're going at. What speed is consciousness? Well, consciousness has no speed. What time is consciousness? Consciousness has no time.
What weight?
What weight? What does consciousness weigh?
Yeah, they had experiments where they were trying to figure out if the soul had substance, and they were weighing the person's body
before and after.
Yeah, before and after. It was just fascinating to see.
Right. At the end of the day, matter changes. It changes its physical properties. It changes with temperature. It changes with speed, with frequency, with all these different things. You say, well, this is amazing. It's fascinating. We've learned so much about matter. What we've learned about matter, even to this point, everything we've learned about matter is that matter is slippery, weird stuff that doesn't really hold. It doesn't have substance. Substance is a word. Is an interesting word. Its properties are elusive. They only appear to be constant. But once you understand what matter is, you say, well, this stuff is like baby town nonsense. It doesn't have any permanence whatsoever. It's continually changing from one thing to another, from energy back to something different. It changes its size, its form. Every part about it reveals how ephemeral it is, how chimerical it is, how the universe almost treats matter like some plaything, which was what Margaret just said. The universe doesn't depend upon matter. The universe has matter like a dog has fleas. It's something which it just kind of deals with and gets rid of. And sometimes it comes in like dust motes and it blows away like dust motes. And if you think of the universe as a whole, as a presence, as a thing, or any piece of it, the matter is not what matters. And to the extent that when we come into existence here, that we believe that matter is important, is exactly what Margaret said. That's why I wanted to come back to it. You come in here with a bias towards matter because you're being given a sandbox, or you're being given a bunch of playthings, a way to interact and realize through that interaction that this is not you. The first thing that an infant learns is what is them and what is not them. When it's something that you probably have seen if you've had children, especially small infants. They'll make their first cry and then they'll look around. What the hell?
Who did that?
Who did that? Mm-hmm. Or they'll whack themselves accidentally in the face, and they'll look around startled, like, well, who did that? Well, you start to realize that I have control over certain things, and then there's the other, and there's me, and there's the other. All of a sudden, the universe expands little by little by little. But you come to a point where you have to kind of move away from that and go into a much more real dimension, which people refer to as the spiritual dimension. But the spiritual dimension, the dimension of consciousness, the dimension of being, is much more real. Why? What doesn't change about you? Through your whole existence in matter, you don't change. You are you. You are you when you're an infant 3 days old, and you're you when you take your last breath, or
Yeah.
3 days before it.
Your awareness doesn't change.
You are you. Yes, you learn things, you have experiences, but it's you. You are you. No matter what happens to you, you're you. Unlike matter.
Well,
Matter does all kinds of weird stuff in between there. Everything sags and goes every other places, and stuff falls out, and stuff grows up, and bumps happen, and every other blessed thing about you changes. If you were your matter, every moment of your existence, you'd be something different, and you would have no idea what's going on.
Well, I think it's interesting that whenever you speak with anyone about, especially around birthdays and things, they'll say, "Gee, I don't feel any different than when I was younger."
Exactly.
And what they're actually referencing is that awareness that they had when they were young. It's the same awareness. It's just you're watching your body go through time and space.
Yes. And the matter which currently temporarily encompasses you is ephemeral, is chimerical. It doesn't really hold you. It doesn't hold you. You know this too. You know, if you've seen somebody pass, that something leaves them. Every other part of their matter is exactly the same, between the instant of what we call life and the instant of what we call not life. Nothing changes. Not one thing changes. Yet, something has changed. The thing that is missing is them. It's you. It's the breath of life, if you will. It becomes difficult to express it in words, but we know it. You know that the you is not there anymore. Every other piece of the body, every other piece of matter is still lying right there, but the you is gone. And you can't measure it. It doesn't have a weight. It doesn't have a time or a place. You can't point to the consciousness and say, there it is. You push right there and you're touching the consciousness. Nope. Penrose's lovely explanation, which he knows is not an explanation of it being some sort of a quantum effect with these microtubules, wherever they are. That's a wonderful physical, but the actual mechanism, what's happening there, is a profound mystery, because there it is. Yes, you have all these architectures and all these ephemeral things, and somehow there's something which grasps onto them and incarnates into physical matter and pushes it around for a while, and then it leaves, and all the things which it could push around are there still, but they're not in a condition that anyone wants to deal with anymore, so it just leaves it behind.
Right.
But what left? Where did it go? Where did it come from? That's the universe. And the matter, the physical flesh, doesn't matter. It's just...
The space is a description of the flows that are in the universe. The universe is a concept, it's a thing. But life is not a thing. It is actually a flow that we are not only interacting with, but part of, which is very different. People think of, when you're thinking of interacting with something, then you've defined us and them. I'm interacting with the them part, and I'm in the us. But the truth of the matter is, what you're actually doing is watching the flow back and forth between the perceptions, the energetic interpretations of the events that are happening to you. The patterns that happen to be forming in your brain when you're going through an event are quite distinct to you. You can have a dozen people going through the exact same thing, and it's always going to be different for every single person, which is fantastic when you think of it, that each person is unique. But that is the gift of the experience of being down here. You have a hands-on or consciousness on ability to be able to become part of this flow. Or another way it's told is this is part of your story. You're creating this flow or this story using this particular vessel in order to play with the matter that is appearing in front of you. Now, the mechanic of it, we don't know how it works. We've got this concept of quantum superposition, and things don't coalesce unless it all collapses into a specific result of a decision. Fascinating, because at that point, when you're only playing with dust motes, you become a little god. It's like you playing with Legos. These are my Legos. I'm going to make this.
Can I go back to a little bit?
Sure.
One point you made, which I think is so profound, I want to just reiterate it a little bit.
Okay.
You said, and everyone will acknowledge that this is true, that if there are three people in a room and there's something happening, that all three of them have their own experience of it.
Right.
But what doesn't have its own experience? The matter in the room does not have its own experience. The matter in the room, the event is the event. Whatever happens, happens. None of the matter has its own experience.
Right.
Why? Because matter is not experiential. Matter, when a physical thing happens, an event happens in the room, every part of the matter will not have an experience of the event, but there will be some change. The matter will go from one state to another. It'll go from liquid to frozen, whatever it is. But every being in the room will have a different experience, which means something very profound. You're not matter. Were you matter, then you would never have a different experience from any other piece of matter. That would violate every principle of matter. When something happens, when an event happens and the matter is involved, you can calculate to within any degree of precision you want what will happen to the matter. We know it. It's all written down in our lovely textbooks, and it works every freaking time.
Right.
But every person will have their own story. Well, that's not matter. Matter, if we were matter, there would never be any different stories. Your story and my story would be the same because we'd just be matter. We wouldn't matter. And I love this word, which matters. Just we wouldn't. The fact that we have separate experiences, that my experience is mine and your experience is yours, is completely antithetical to matter. Were we actually matter, there would be no mine, no yours, no experience. Matter doesn't care. Matter doesn't experience things.
It would be predictable.
It would be clockwork.
Yes, it would always have the same result.
Same result. And the universe, in and of itself, without consciousness, has no cause. Nothing matters in the universe without consciousness, because there is no experience. So yes, you're set afloat in a matter boat. That's kind of poetic. You're set afloat into the vastness of matter, which we all know is just the tiniest little infinitesimal nothingness within the universe. But yes, there it is. It's still quite vast. And you're in a piece of it, which is incredibly small, and you're made aware of that. But yet, and this is the most important part about it, you have your own experience. How did you do that? How did you fit it in this tiny little piece of matter which doesn't matter? Because that's not you. You are not matter. You are not matter. You are of the universe. You are one with the consciousness, with the presence. which is what the universe really is. The matter part of the universe is, as we know from science, it is not what the universe is. It is literally an afterthought.
Well, I'd like to point out that consciousness, and I'm talking about divine consciousness, broad consciousness, the consciousness that is much more than the universe itself. The universe, again, is this space and time boundary system. It's a creation, just like mental constructs are a creation. But your being state far outstripes all of that. And to understand that this space and time is actually where we can inject a consciousness point of ourselves in to experience the vastness of these flows. Again, it has to do with relationship. We're here to learn about relationship, and it's not just between you and the other person. It's between you and the things around you that you choose to make matter.
This word is getting overused. But you're right.
Well, thanks.
You're right. In this case, again, your experience, which is yours and yours alone, your unique experience, it shows from which you are. You are of presence. You are of you are an emanation of source, that which contains the universe, which is outside the universe. The universe itself is a place, it's a space. It has within it matter that is almost insignificant. You get to go float on a matter boat, but yet you carry with you, because you say, I am a being, and I have my own experience. You are instantly, in essence, disassociating yourself with both matter and the universe at large, because you can experience the universe. You couldn't experience the universe were you not of source, which is outside of it. I mentioned earlier that you can imagine yourself standing outside the universe. Well, isn't that amazing? That you can imagine yourself, that you can place your presence in a spot which would be outside the universe. The imagination alone, that conceptual, the ability to make a conceptual leap like that, shows you are not of matter. Matter doesn't make conceptual leaps. The universe doesn't imagine anything. Matter doesn't have any particular way to do anything except just kind of react to what, something hits into something and something else goes in another direction. It doesn't have an experience, or not a unique one. It doesn't have any presence, or at least not a unique one.
It doesn't have a soul.
Doesn't have a soul.
Okay, so your soul is the repository of your particular life existence down here. What you've done with your relationships, how you've made your decisions, and how you've loved life. How have you loved life? Yeah, I'm not saying it's good all the time. We can attest to that. It's not good all the time. But have you loved life? How have you loved life? Have you helped other consciousness, other people, other souls love life? Take steps forward. Not be afraid. Because when you are in fear slows down that experience, and suddenly you ossify. Fear will equate you to matter, to be manipulated by fear. And that's not who you are.
That's interesting. That might be something we have to talk about, but equating you to matter through fear, that's an interesting thing.
Well, it slows your whole being down, and you think so much less of yourself as not even a dust mote at that point. It's less than a dust mote. Like, no.
But this is totally, again, just briefly, because we don't have a lot of time, but, that the consciousness, however deeply veiled in its concepts of matter, its fears, its pain bodies, no matter what, it's always there. You're always you, somewhere underneath there, which is why you can emerge from it.
Well, you will understand what it means to be in that fear, and you get to consciously choose to raise it up. And when you raise it up for yourself, you raise it up for all those that are watching you.
That's true. And the other thing that we just very, very quickly, matter doesn't choose things either. And that's how you know you're not matter. And we have to choose one thing here, which is we have to choose to end the show.
We have. So I'm Margaret.
First show of 2025, and I'm Michael.
And thank you guys for coming and listening.